Is there more information about the birth of Jesus that is not contained in the Bible? What was the mysterious light in the sky on the first Christmas? Where did the Holy Family go to escape the death warrant of King Herod? Are there special places where people are still touched by the incredible power of the Holy Family? Tonight, we will uncover the miracle of the first Christmas.
We all know the story of Christmas, but mysteries of the first Christmas are buried under layers of sand, hidden in unknown caves, encrypted in old papyrus and leather texts. We have bits and pieces of a puzzle that we've put together to bring you an amazing new look at a story you only thought you knew.
In order to understand the story of Christmas, it is important to imagine life 2,000 years ago. The world was very simple. These are the ruins of an ancient town, small by today's standards, with perhaps 200 to 300 residents. The people of these small villages filled their days with the tasks of daily life. Science, as we know it, did not exist. People believed the sky separated earth from the divine. If something rose, it went to heaven. If something fell, it came from heaven. Illness and disease could be attributed to divine punishment. People were religious. They believed in miracles, acts of God, and magic, the works of Satan. The Romans were in charge of their lives. They hoped that a Messiah who would appear in their lifetime would change their existence. The stories they told reflected the simple life they led.
One of the most striking things about life in Palestine at the time of Jesus would have been its sheer diversity of population. Many people sometimes think that there was an entity known as simply the Jews at the time of Jesus. There was no such thing as the Jews. There was anything from apocalyptic, zealous sects who were very anxious about the end times, all the way to a much more calm and institutionalized form of religion associated with the temple in Jerusalem. It's often been suggested that the time of Palestine and the time of Jesus was a time when people were ready for a Messiah. It was a source of hope that the present conditions that they were living in would come to an end. We have to remember, Roman occupation was a brutal affair, and religion served to buttress their power and served to promote their dominance over the populations that they had conquered.
The reason this was such perfect timing for a Messiah to be born, or Jesus or anyone else for that matter, was that for the first time, the terrible Roman civil wars of the previous century had ended in a wonderful, blissful peace. There was also a common universal language across the whole Mediterranean basin. It was common commercial Greek. This is one of the reasons that the faith born with that baby in Bethlehem would be able to hurdle national and international barriers so successfully.
In order to understand the story of Christmas, it is important to imagine the
Miraculous birth of Jesus and the miracles he performed in his early life.
The subject of miracles, of course, is a very controversial one because we live in a very rational and scientific age. And so we're fascinated with the idea that people routinely thought that non-rational things occurred, that unexplainable things occurred. And yet, from the sources that we have, It's clear that that was a common idea at the time of Jesus.
I've heard people tell me that they've seen angels and that their young grandsons have seen angels. After someone has departed, they refer to seeing the angel with grandma, and I've never seen it myself, but I have to believe people when they say that.
Very often you hear that expression, who says the age of miracles is past? We hear of all kinds of mysterious things taking place in the present day yet. Patients who are terminally ill and there's no hope for them, bouncing back from the very jaws of death to perfect health. It happens.
I think that it is foolish for someone to say there is no such thing as a miracle. By their very nature, you cannot prove a miracle. If it is repeatable, then it's not miraculous. Miracles are a phenomenon of faith, and they are intended to be a part of faith journeys.
Now, this faith thing is a very, very important human response to what is happening here. And God, who wired us, I think wants that human response called faith, because then we invest ourselves in what we believe. So, what I'm trying to say is there is enough that has been provided for us in the historical records outside the Bible and in the archaeological evidence outside the Bible and in the geographical considerations that you can find over there that show that the faith has a very firm intellectual basis. And it's not blind or dumb at all, but it is our response, which is terribly important as far as this great plan is concerned.
The story of the first Christmas gave birth to a new religion that has inspired the faith of millions of people for over 2,000 years.
The story of the first Christmas begins in Nazareth, home of Mary and Joseph, two ordinary people chosen to partake in an extraordinary event.
They were given a special task. Mary to bear the child who would be the Son of God, and Joseph to be the protector of Mary and Jesus, and in that sense being elevated to a kind of special status that goes along with their special role. I would think they did have a closeness to God.
Their faith was the center of their lives. As was the custom of that time, a woman had to be a virgin when she married. Joseph thought he found the perfect woman to be his wife in the young woman Mary. She came from a religious family and was a virgin. Here in the Church of the Annunciation, people travel from all over the globe to honor the first miracle of Christmas.
Now, certainly there are miracles, a miraculous dimension that are attached to various episodes in the Nativity. According to the New Testament, the angel Gabriel appeared under unique circumstances to this wonderful little peasant girl, Mary, probably not more than 15 years old, and she was told that she would be the mother of the great messianic figure, and it's remarkable, her acceptance. She says, so be it. She makes a fabulous statement. So often it's overlooked. It goes like this: behold, in the future, all generations will call me blessed. Now that turned out to be not an empty prophecy at all. Every generation since that first Christmas, more and more people have called her blessed because of what happened at that time. That is unlike anything we find in all of antiquity.
That event took place in this cave. Mary's trust in the angel's message has inspired millions to journey here to renew their faith. Archaeological excavations reveal evidence of pilgrimage as early as 350 AD. As Christianity grew, so did visits of the faithful. A small chapel honors the second miracle.
And then, of course, we have the angelic appearance to Joseph. Joseph, who's engaged to this woman and certainly hasn't married her yet, finds out that his fiancée is going to have a child. Well, Joseph did what any man would normally do at that point. He would break off the marriage plans, and he was ready to do exactly that until he also was visited by the angel the angel explained what an unusual child was on the way.
Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus ordered a census. Joseph and Mary set out for Bethlehem.
The Roman emperor at the time was Augustus. As a matter of fact, he's the one that Luke first mentions in his nativity account. And his censuses, by the way, were rather famous. It was that middle census of 8 BC, which started a chain of events that brought the Holy Family down to Bethlehem.
The census demanded that all citizens return to their place of birth. Bethlehem was the home of Joseph, so he and Mary set out. The journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem could take well over a week when traveling by foot or mule. Longer still, if made by a pregnant woman. When they reached Bethlehem, the time came for Mary to deliver her child. Joseph searched for a room, but the small town had no vacancies.
According to one of the earliest church fathers, he knew Bethlehem and knew the account, and so he said that Jesus was born in a grotto or a cave or a cavern that was used as a stable. So it was in one of these grottos that Jesus was born.
And on that night in Bethlehem, Jesus, the child of Mary and Joseph, was born.
The main miracle of the whole thing, of course, is that Jesus became a human, that God enters the human condition, which really bursts all the bounds of logic and reason, which is what a miracle often does.
This was God's crossing the great divide between the divine and the human and taking on the form of a little baby. And that baby would grow up to suffer, die, and rise again according to Christian theology in order that we could all be made his brothers and sisters, his fellow children of God. According to Luke's Gospel, when the shepherds announced the good news about the birth of a Messiah in Bethlehem, the heavens opened up and there was a heavenly choir which said, "Glory to God in the highest and peace on goodwill toward men."
In 330, Queen Helena, mother of Emperor Constantine, ordered the first church of the Nativity to be built. The original church was destroyed. What remains today is a structure from 529. In the Church of the Nativity, hundreds of thousands of people visit the birthplace of Jesus. Their pilgrimage is a testimony to the enduring and miraculous power of the first Christmas. As they walk through the narrow passageways and visit the altar, they relive the glorious spirit of the moment of Jesus' birth. A birth which would initiate a series of events that would change the world forever.
The legend of the Milk Grotto has inspired couples throughout the world to seek its incredible powder with extraordinary results.
Brother Lawrence Bodie relates the significance of this site.
Yes, according to the tradition, the Holy Family was in this place when Mary was giving milk to the baby. One day, a drop of her milk fell and turned the grotto into Mary's milk. Inside, the grotto is pure white. And with this powder, men and women with maternal problems, they come here and ask for the powder. And each day they mix it with milk or water and they drink it together. And then they ask to be healed so that they can have a family. And in the last 4 years, we've heard of over 50 women who have been healed with this devotion. These are some of the pictures of the babies that have been born out of this devotion.
We found numerous accounts where these miracles have occurred, but in the story you're about to see, not only was the couple blessed with a child, but the spirit of the Holy Family saved the baby's life.
Sarah and her husband wanted to have a large family. For many years, they tried unsuccessfully to have a child. Sarah became depressed. Her husband, Samson, suggested they talk to someone.
I keep telling her things will work themselves out, but she won't listen to me.
Sarah thought she and Samson were being punished for some unknown reason.
We are good people. We don't ask for much.
Sarah, calm down. Getting upset is not going to help the situation.
But we have so much love to give. I mean, why has God forgotten us?
Sister told us to visit the milk grotto and pray for a miracle.
Just open your heart, and you'll find your way to Him.
In her heart, Sarah knew that Sister King was right. She suggested they put their faith in the milk grotto.
We returned home and drank the sacred powder.
Finally, their prayers were answered.
Our son is living proof of the miraculous power of the milk grotto.
But when the child was only a few months old, tragedy struck. Sister King approached the couple, who were visibly shaken.
The baby, he's sick.
Oh no, what's wrong?
Sister listened as they recounted their story.
He wouldn't stop crying, and he wouldn't eat.
One evening, Sarah went to check on the baby, only to find that the child was not breathing.
Samson! Quickly come here! There's something wrong with the baby! Samson!
What's the matter, Sarah?
The baby, he's not breathing.
Oh my God.
Oh, no,
She and Samson rushed their child to the hospital.
he's not breathing. Oh my goodness, that must have been horrible for you.
The
child's diagnosis was not good.
They were able to.
He had a brain tumor.
He can breathe again, but when they examined him,
Even if the operation was successful, the boy would have severe brain damage. The parents were devastated.
And they don't give him much of a chance.
Sister King tried to keep the couple from losing their faith.
When Sister heard about our child, she told us to return to the milk grotto and make a devotion. She assured us that if our prayers were answered before, they would be again.
this is what you should do. I want you to pray this.
Sister King told them to write the baby's name on a slip of paper and place it on a special altar whenever they visited the church.
We prayed every day in our church, asking for the power of the milk grotto to help our child.
The couple followed the sister's advice. Each day for a month they visited the church and placed a prayer note on the altar. Sarah lit a candle and prayed for the Holy Family to give her strength.
This came for you.
I wanted to send this letter because I didn't know if I could express my feelings in person. The night before the baby's surgery, something miraculous happened. I was sitting by the window holding the baby when a brilliant light filled the room. First, the light shone on me, then it fell on my baby's face.
And at that moment, I knew that my prayers were answered, that the miraculous power of the first Christmas had passed through the Milk Grotto and into our lives.
Sure enough, when we took the baby to the hospital, the doctors were baffled. Our baby was completely cured. I'm giving the money we would have used for the operation to the church. I know you will do something good with it. We were finally at last a happy, healthy family. I will never doubt the power of faith.
The next miracle appeared in the sky. It was a star that shone so bright that it could be seen for thousands of miles. In Persia, this star attracted the attention of 3 kings or magi. They were searching the heavens for a sign foretold in their prophecies, a sign that a king would be born. What they saw that night is known to us today as the Star of Bethlehem.
What star was powerful enough to attract the attention of the wise men hundreds of miles away? We turn to the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles to find the answers.
Most astronomers believe we should look at what the planets were doing if we want to know what the star was. And that's because the Magi were astrologers. You'll often hear that the star led them to Jerusalem and then on to Bethlehem. But I don't believe that's the case. The star marked the fulfillment of the prophecies. When the Magi saw the star, whatever it was, that told them that these prophecies had been fulfilled. They had to interpret this celestial sign. But the star didn't lead them anywhere. It didn't guide them anywhere. They saw the star and they said, aha, it's time to act. So the question is, what star, or really what sign in the sky, would be sufficiently exciting to get the Magi excited and on their way?
People have long speculated on just what caused the appearance of a bright, moving star. Perhaps it was a supernova or a comet. Well, ancient records kept by Chinese astronomers show no record of an exploding star at the time of Jesus' birth. And the Magi would have taken a comet as a sign of some impending disaster, not the birth of a savior. Modern astronomers are left with only one conclusion.
To identify the star that the Magi saw, we have to look at the sky as the Magi would have seen it. So if you'll tell me when Jesus was born, I can crank up the desktop computer and see what the sky was like. If you were standing in Persia looking at the Star of Bethlehem, what you probably would have seen is a conjunction of planets. That's one planet passing another, 2 planets very close together.
If Moseley is correct, this is probably what the Magi saw. 2 planets that looked like a single bright star moving across the night sky.
Now, I don't believe in astrology, but the Magi did. And according to the astrology of the ancient Near East, Jupiter, being the bright and largest planet, was called the king's planet. And the ringed planet Saturn was called the shield or defender of Palestine. And so now you translate. Jupiter almost hits Saturn. A king is coming to Palestine.
But if the Magi were astrologers, shouldn't we turn to astrology for the answers? Astrologer Jean Avery provides more insight on the Star of Bethlehem.
So I don't think Saturn would have been part, in my estimation, would not have been part of the Star of Bethlehem.
Could astrology provide the answer as to what planets would set the Magi on their course to Bethlehem?
So if the Magi were in Persia looking up at the night sky, they might have seen this brilliance of the conjunction of Venus and Jupiter, which would have produced a very bright light, and it would have captured their attention, of course. Each planet has a description. As an example, Jupiter is the planet that describes religion or philosophy or humor or this curiosity about the workings of the universe, the awe at the workings of the universe. And Venus, in my mind, in its highest connotation, describes social justice.
But was it a conjunction of planets?
A conjunction in astrology is exactly the same thing as a conjunction in astronomy. It's just that we ascribe a meaning to that conjunction. And the meaning of the conjunction of Jupiter and Venus is great good fortune. Harmony, beauty, pleasure, love, everything that could be wonderfully, positive in one's life.
But not everyone thinks that scientific proof is a necessary element to the Christmas story.
The attempt to find some kind of astronomical event at about the right time, I think, misses the point. Whenever we try to say that a miracle is explained by some coincidence, it's not miraculous if it was just a coincidental Halley's Comet or something like that. The point of the story is this was a miracle, not that it was an accidental astronomical phenomenon.
Even as the miracle of the virgin birth took place in Bethlehem, there was another piece of this miraculous story unfolding in the East. 3 magi, or wise men, had already seen a sign in the night sky. A sign that a great king would be born in Judea.
We don't have definite information on this, but apparently there were Zoroastrian priests. As far as how many of them there were and who they were, this is all later legend. All we know is that Magi came from the East, and that's really the limit to our knowledge of who these specific people were.
The principles of Zoroastrianism include the belief in an afterlife and the continuous struggle between the universal spirit of good against the spirit of evil. The good ultimately prevails.
The Magi are really very well known as a fraternity, as a caste of very wise men. Now, they were the medical experts, the lawyers, they were religious historians, they were astronomers, astrologers, they were walking universities. And they're very well known both in Babylonia and Persia.
What we know is that the names of the wise men and the fact that one of them was traditionally black, for example, that Casper became African, for example, or black, is an interesting and charming tradition, but we know it doesn't go back very far.
But is it more important to know who the Magi were or what they represented?
The 3 wise men, I think, represent a number of different aspects of the story that Matthew wants to emphasize. For one thing, it emphasizes that Gentiles even are understanding the significance of this birth. It's borrowing the idea of, well, people in the East are very wise. They know such things. And so there's a kind of validation of this event that is lent to this by the arrival of 3 wise people.
Symbolism is important, but what other factors might affect the interpretation of their gifts?
The gifts of the wise men in its original setting undoubtedly simply represented that these are symbols of Gentiles, foreigners, recognizing that the birth of this child will have cross-cultural significance.
3 gifts are mentioned: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold, a royal symbol, and also very handy to have as traveler's checks later on when they make that flight to Egypt. Frankincense, to indicate the priestly function of Jesus in the future. And myrrh, that's an interesting salve used medicinally, and it was also used to embalm bodies after death. So in a sense, you have these very prophetic gifts that were given Jesus right at his birth.
The Magi followed the star to Jerusalem, where they hoped to find the newborn king. But the Magi weren't the only ones to notice the Star of Bethlehem. It also caught the attention of King of Judea, Herod.
They follow it, and the first place they come, since they interpret the star as a portent of an important royal birth, so naturally where they go is the palace in Jerusalem, where Herod, the king, resided. Herod was a killing kind of guy. He managed to get the kingdom through influential connections in Rome. He was a person who was known to be quite brutal to anyone who would threaten the security of his own throne. Whenever he suspected that there would be a rival, he killed them, no matter what age they were, no matter who they were. He arranged some pretext, and he had them strangled or beheaded or killed in one way or other. He was not interested in a new king being born. He was quite happy with the king that he represented right then and there.
The whole portrait that we get of Herod from the pages of Josephus, first-century Jewish historian, almost an eyewitness, compares exactly with the portrait we get of Herod in Matthew's Gospel.
Once the Magi told him about the child, Herod became interested in finding this newborn king. Using the Magi as his unknowing agents, Herod sent them to search for the new Messiah in Bethlehem and report back.
They visit Jesus, they find him, they offer him their presents, and then they're told through a vision experience that Herod really is up to no good, and they bypass Jerusalem and go back directly to home, and that leaves Herod with the suspicion that there's a rival somewhere nearby, but he doesn't know who it is.
After Herod realized the Magi had tricked him, he proclaimed his edict that all boys under the age of 2 in Bethlehem be rounded up and slaughtered. Historical records of the time make no mention of this horrible event, leading some modern scholars wondering if it ever happened at all.
I think the reason so many people doubt this episode is because they think too many babies were killed. You know, some say hundreds of Jewish boy babies killed, but that's wrong. Bethlehem is only 1,500 people, maybe 2,000. Do an actuarial study of a town that size, you wouldn't have more than 20 babies, 2 years old and under, half of them the wrong sex. So we're talking about only 10 to 12 babies. There's no physical evidence to support the actual massacre of the infants, but Josephus tells us that in his last days, Herod was planning something far worse than killing the babies of Bethlehem. Herod was worried that nobody would mourn his own passing, and so he was going to give them something to cry about. He asked his dear sister Salome to arrest all the Jewish leaders in Palestine and have them brought into the hippodrome outside his winter palace at Jericho. And the moment his death was announced, they were to be murdered in cold blood. Why? So that thousands of households would be crying at the moment Herod died. Now, is that the sort of sweet fellow who could have killed 10 babies in Bethlehem? I do think so.
But thanks to a warning from an angel, the Holy Family fled into the desert, beginning a long journey toward Egypt.
Well, they could have put 2 and 2 together quite easily and then figured it would be the best thing to go. And then the vision experience, according to the Gospel of Matthew, that Joseph has, confirms that, where he senses a communication from God through an angel to get out of town because Herod is about to, the axe is about to fall.
As for the Magi, they returned to some unknown place in the east, leaving behind only the story of their visit.
Is there any proof that the Magi existed? We have unearthed some remarkable evidence that could prove they did. Modern astronomy can prove how the heavens appeared when the Magi first looked up and saw the Star of Bethlehem. But what about the wise men themselves? Does their story end with a visit to the infant Jesus, or is there more to learn about them? There was a good deal of debate among our own experts about who the Magi were, and if the 3 kings known as Gaspar, Balthazar, and Melchior even existed at all.
In modern times, the 3 Magi, Gaspar, Balthazar, and Melchior, were thought to be a fable. Scholars believed that their names and legendary kingdoms were nothing more than stories of fiction written after the Bible. But when archaeologists began to search around the area of Quequa by the Iran-Afghanistan border, their digging revealed some intriguing clues that the kingdom of at least one of the Magi, King Gaspar, had actually existed.
Look.
The discovery of a large cache of ancient coins was remarkable. But their real value lay in an inscription on the backside.
It was made in Harwadia, in the kingdom of His Highness King Gaspar.
From the three Magi?
Yes, one of the three wise men.
It was a stunning revelation. The discovery of the coins from Gaspar's kingdom was the first hard evidence that these legendary kings actually existed. But the discovery of the coins was not the end of the story. In fact, it was only the beginning of a quest to discover the actual lost kingdom of Gaspar. When an American archaeologist working in Cairo heard rumors about the discovery of the coins, he decided to pursue the mystery further.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking for an old coin.
Well, look here, my friend. I have many ancient coins for you.
No. I'm looking for a very rare coin. About this big, with the face of the king of Harawachia printed on one side.
Perhaps some of the coins from the dig in Quequa had not made it to the museum. If so, the antiquities markets in downtown Cairo was just the place to find out.
Anya? Perhaps you would care to buy.
How much?
For you, 300.
2.
Done.
This is Gaspar?
Ah, yes, Gaspar.
Where was it found?
It was found here, at Quequa, near the dried Lake Hamun.
The archaeologist's search paid off. He had found the coin and now had the keys he needed to begin his search. The archaeologist assembled a team and headed to a site at Quequa near the Iran-Afghanistan border in search of the ruins of the lost castle of the man on the coin, King Gaspar.
Day 15. We're still digging, but without any major find to report.
After weeks of digging without success, it looked as if the stories of a lost castle might be a fable after all. With time running out, the entire expedition was becoming a futile effort.
Hassan! Omar! Come here! Professor! 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 Professor!
The professor rushed up the hill as the workers began to uncover the edge of something big.
part of a building. It's a foundation. Find the edges, clear away this dirt.
They had found the foundations of Gaspar's castle.
We found it, Professor, we found it!
If the coins had not already shown that the Magi were real, now there was concrete proof.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
But the story of the wise men does not end there. 16 centuries earlier, there'd already been an even more compelling discovery made by a Roman empress. Helen was the mother of the first Roman emperor to become a Christian, Emperor Constantine. As a devout Christian herself, Helen traveled the world building churches on holy sites and searching for relics of Jesus' life.
Look, can you see it?
On one such expedition, a young man dared to approach the Queen with news of a miraculous find. Helen could not believe her eyes. She had found the cross upon which Jesus himself was crucified. News of Empress Helen's find quickly spread around the world, until it reached a king in Persia who felt compelled to unite such a powerful relic of Jesus' death with one that his country had possessed for 300 years. A relic of Jesus' birth.
I have been sent by the King of Persia to give you an extraordinary gift.
Is this true?
The remains of the three Magi.
The Empress decided that the best place for this miraculous discovery was the church where she had been baptized in Milan. Helen made the long journey from Judea to deliver the chest to her grateful church, where it was carefully preserved and safely placed in its treasury alongside other riches.
Your gift will be treasured.
The remains of the three kings rested undisturbed in the church for 800 years, until an ambitious Germanic warlord, Frederick Barbarossa, invaded Italy.
Stop! Oh, no! Move! No!
Conquering Milan in 1162, Barbarossa's army ransacked the church and plundered its treasures.
Stop! Follow your immortal soul!
Ignoring the pleas of the clergy, the soldiers began pillaging the church's treasures. At first, the soldiers busied themselves with the obvious valuables, but when they turned their attention to the chest, they had no idea of the significance of what lay inside. The priests' protests were no match for Barbarossa and his army.
No! No! You can't do this! No!
Barbarossa had to discover what was in the chest.
No! Please!
Take it away and feed him to the dogs.
No! No! No, you can't! No! No!
Barbarossa crowned himself king in Milan and sent the relics of the three Magi back to Germany, where they are still guarded to this day. Is there more information about the birth of Jesus that is not contained in the Bible? What was the mysterious light in the sky on the first Christmas? Where did the Holy Family go to escape the death warrant of King Herod? Are there special places where people are still touched by the incredible power of the Holy Family? Tonight, we will uncover the miracle of the first Christmas.
During Jesus' time, Palestine was a very different place than it is today. People lived simply, and conditions were difficult. It was part of the Roman Empire, and the people were subject to its harsh rule. But people were also religious. They believed in God and the power of miracles to change their lives. They were ready for a Messiah to come and liberate them. Ancient Jewish prophecies told that a child would be born in Bethlehem, and that child would be their king. The planets aligned in the sky, telling a group of wise men in the east that the time for the birth had come. It was then that a young peasant girl from Galilee received the news that she would bear this special child. Forced to travel for a census, Mary gave birth in a grotto in Bethlehem. When the Magi told King Herod the news that a new king had been born, he tried to have the infant Jesus killed. But with a warning from an angel, the Holy Family fled from Bethlehem to the safety of Egypt. Soon after his birth, Jesus began to perform miracles that touched the lives of the people around him. The power of these events and his influence is remembered by generations of people living in the Holy Land, and it is recorded in ancient texts that survive to this day. Modern astronomers have calculated the positions of the planets 2,000 years ago, concluding that it must have been the conjunction of the planets Venus and Jupiter that formed the bright star that the wise men saw in the night sky. We know that these wise men, or Magi, found the infant Jesus in Bethlehem and gave him gifts. But that is all that was known about them until modern archaeologists unearthed evidence proving that these were real men living in Persia. On a dig in Iran, a German archaeologist found coins minted in the kingdom of Harawatia by a king named Gaspar. The name and the location fit perfectly with the story told in the Bible. An American archaeologist picked up the trail. His journey took him to Iran, where he unearthed the foundations of Gaspar's castle, finally proving his existence after 2,000 years.
Two great archaeological finds of the 20th century occurred just after the end of the Second World War. Could it be that the discoveries of the Gnostic Gospels and the Dead Sea Scrolls resurfaced in order to help heal the devastating wounds of that war?
Well, as we know, it was a brutal fight to put down the Nazis in Germany. Soldiers were killed, millions. Many lives were lost. Whole cities were reduced to rubble. For the Jews in particular, it was a difficult time. They were a displaced people. The Nazis had ravaged them. You have to understand that whole families were torn apart by the Holocaust. The orphans, the stragglers, the survivors were left to somehow make sense of what had happened to them. The effect of this violence and hatred left a hole that must have seemed impossible to fill. Well, miraculously, really, two discoveries were made right at that same time in the deserts of Egypt and Israel. Discoveries which recalled another Jewish man who had taught peace and love, Jesus of Nazareth. They were the Gnostic Gospels and the Dead Sea Scrolls, both religious texts dating from the time of Jesus. The first, the Gnostic Gospels, was written by Christians and gives us some insight into what the first Christian church must have been like. The second, the Dead Sea Scrolls, was written by Jews who were living in the time of Jesus and gives us an insight into what his life must have been like. These were extraordinary finds that offered an old tradition of peace, a tradition that had been sent to earth by God and forged in the Jewish homeland over 2,000 years ago. This was the first time in history that the Jews, scattered Jews, were able to return home to the newly formed state of Israel. After all this destruction, it must have been an unbelievable chance for rebirth. But ironically, this new hope was marred by another war between the Arabs and the Israelis, the ancient war over ownership of the new Jewish state of Israel. Well, here's Israel, the new state surrounded on every side by Arab nations, and it's suddenly forced to defend itself, to fight for its very life on the exact day that it declares its independence. Well, the dust clears, and miraculously, against all odds, Israel still stands. And this sense of new hope remained alive. You have to marvel at the coincidence that the Gnostic Gospels, the Dead Sea Scrolls, both had been buried for 2,000 years, should be discovered within months of each other, and on the eve of the birth of Israel. One wonders if that could just be a coincidence, or if perhaps it's another sort of miracle. Well, after the dust settled, scholars finally had a chance to take a look at these new texts and astonishingly realized that we had discovered ancient writings on Jesus.
It's often not realized that Alexander the Great, who is active about 300 before the Common Era, 300 years before Jesus is born, Alexander the Great plays a major role in the spread of Christianity. First of all, by conquering the virtually entire known world at that time, Alexander the Great spread Greek culture and, most importantly, the Greek language throughout all of these areas. And that is the language in which the Christian Gospels seem to have been originally written. In the beginning, Christianity was somewhat anarchic. That is, it did not have a rigid system of organization. The earliest Christians, immediately after the death of Jesus, viewed themselves as simply an extension of Judaism. In that sense, they had already differentiated themselves from the ancient cults associated with fertility, perhaps worship of astrological bodies such as the moon, the sun, the stars. The Judaic Christians were interested only in converting other Jews to Christianity. Shortly after the arrival of Christianity on the scene in Judaism, a person named Saul converts to Christianity and he becomes known as Paul, St. Paul. His vision of Christianity is somewhat different than that of James and the earliest Christians in Jerusalem. He receives the message, the understanding that all human beings, regardless of their racial or religious background, can become Christians. Paul, he is preaching his version of the gospel and converting people to his brand of Gentile Christianity, to Greek Christianity, and this, of course, without the hindrances or the impediments of mandatory circumcision, kosher dietary regulations, and the other things that would have seemed strange to a pagan. Without those things, Gentile Christianity flourished and was successful and became the dominant form of Christianity that, of course, we know today. One of the great problems in early Christianity was to reconcile the varying theologies that had developed in these various camps of Christianity. This, of course, led to a relatively anarchic setup within Christianity. If the Holy Spirit is giving revelations to anybody and everybody, then it's very difficult to have a common belief and a common creed to which you are going to subscribe. The Emperor Constantine, wanting peace within his empire and wanting these Christian groups to quit squabbling over theology, convenes the Council of Nicaea in 325. And Constantine himself appears to have chaired the council and entered into the debates. In some ways, the Council of Nicaea can be regarded as one of the key points in the founding of Christianity as it will continue through the centuries on into the Middle Ages and to the modern period. Many people don't realize that the creation of the New Testament was a very long and painful process. The New Testament, the 27 books that Christians now consider to be authoritative, did not simply fall out of the heavens at some early point in Christianity.
Of course, the process of how the New Testament came to be the way we have it today is a controversial and vexed issue. We believe now that there was already, within 20 or 30 years of the time of Jesus, a circulation of some of the sayings of Jesus written down. As people realized, hey, wait a minute, we're not going to have these people around much longer. We're not going to be able to just sit down and say, now, Peter, what did Jesus say when you asked him? But as that generation begins to pass, the later followers begin to realize, hey, we've got to write some of this stuff down so that we can use it and teach from it and share with other believers. So that led to the initial writing of these documents.
It's always fascinating to look at how the New Testament is put together, because as the Gnostic Gospels and the Dead Sea Scrolls prove, there were many important ancient writings that never made it into the Bible at all.
What's fascinating is that there are sources on Jesus outside of the biblical documents. I think most people don't know that. The apocryphal Gospels were responses to the original four Gospels. They tried to fill in the gaps in the Gospel records, the childhood stories of Jesus that are not reported. We have other stories, the history of Joseph the carpenter, which explains what they made in the carpenter shop. We have the Arabic Gospel of the Infancy, which talks about these wonderful stories about the palm tree on the way to Egypt. We have a lot of these accounts that retell the biblical episodes, but add all kinds of detail.
Well, some of them, like the Gospel of Thomas, the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, was probably formulated in Gnostic circumstances because there are tendencies in the way the story is told to stress Jesus' wisdom. The same thing is true of most of those infancy and extraneous Gospels, we can call them that, or apocryphal Gospels, that aren't in the mainstream, that weren't accepted as biblical. The history of the Gnostics is very interesting. Even as early as the 2nd century, that movement was a very strong movement. The Gnostic type of Christianity was the dominant type of Christianity.
Gnosticism comes from the term gnosis, to know, that is knowledge. And it was a sect, it was a philosophy that believed that there was a kind of secret knowledge that people should learn in order to fully understand what life was about, in order to understand what God was like.
They produced literature. There's a large amount of literature. In fact, the Gospels and the other Gnostic writings that recently were found are included in a book which is even longer than the New Testament itself. But then the official church eventually saw this as kind of an eccentric form of religion, off the beam, and took measures to suppress it. What happened to these Gospels and why were they eliminated? Well, at one point, actually, the bishops of Rome condemned them and said they weren't to be used anymore. Then the bishops of Rome, the popes, started to try to eliminate the use of these other materials, which were considered to be not just irrelevant, but also harmful and damaging. One of the people there saw that the writing was on the wall for this Gnostic literature and put it all together and hid it at the face of a cliff.
How the Gnostic Gospels were brought back to life is as mysterious as the Gnostic sect itself.
The discovery of the Gnostic Gospels is an incredible story. It occurred in December of 1945 in Egypt along the Upper Nile River, about 300 miles to the south of Cairo. There was a group of camel drivers who were looking for fertilizer along the banks of the Nile. And one of the camel drivers happened upon an earthenware jar.
Ali! Ali, come quickly! What's going on?
His brother, who was the leader of the group, whose name happened to be Muhammad Ali, took the jar and thought at first that it might contain a genie, an evil spirit that would haunt him if he opened it. Then he thought that it might also contain gold. And finally, his greed overcame his fear.
Give me a shovel!
And for a few moments, he thought that he had discovered gold because the air was filled with tiny pieces of this yellow substance. And he very quickly realized that rather than gold, they were tiny pieces of papyrus.
When Ali unraveled the leather pouches, they contained old papyrus text.
Take one, please.
The men left discouraged. Ali begged the others to take some of the papers, but they refused.
Take some. Take some. Take one.
Ali gathered the contents of the pot, thinking that he might be able to use or perhaps sell the leather. He didn't realize that the papyrus papers he had found were Gnostic writings, long thought lost.
They were, in fact, priceless manuscripts, and that would constitute one of the most important archaeological finds of the 20th century.
It took no time before he was approached by an antique dealer.
Where is it?
Right here.
What happened was that word started to leak out among the antiquities dealers in Cairo.
You have to give me a good price.
You should take 500.
No, 500, no.
Ali thought that he was driving a hard bargain.
600? Okay, I'll take 600.
His fear of unleashing a curse would not be unfounded. Ali had no idea that the manuscripts he had found would set off a series of events that would affect the lives of those who touched them.
I have something here you'd be interested in.
Archaeologist Jean Dorès received an anonymous tip about the papers that sent him off to Cairo. Dorès was a well-known expert studying ancient Coptic texts. Upon his arrival in Cairo, Dorès received another message, this one from his old friend Togo Mina, head of the Coptic Museum.
Mina! Dorès, my friend.
One of the first people who found out about Muhammad Ali's discovery was Togo Mina, who was the director of the Coptic Museum in Cairo.
Mina showed Dorès a page of the Gnostic writings he had just purchased from a Belgian antique dealer, Albert Eid. These writings were long thought to be more fabrication than reality. Dorès wanted to see if there were any more pages in circulation.
I'll take you there.
While Dorès and Mina headed off to Alfred Eid's, the black market was doing a brisk business in manuscript sales. The black marketeer who purchased the entire collection paid antique dealer Maria Dattari a visit. It took her no time to realize the value of the papyrus texts and bought what she could afford.
How much do you want for them?
20.
No. That's too much.
15 will get you 2.
I'll take 2.
I'll be back. I'm sure you'll be wanting the others.
Hyde was not surprised by his visitor's interest in the texts, but would not reveal where he obtained the manuscripts.
Where did you get this?
I have my connections.
How much for this one?
The government cannot afford this.
Don't take this out of the country.
At the time, the Egyptian government had a nasty habit of confiscating antique, valuable items without compensating the owner. So if you found something, if you wanted to sell it, it had to be done on the black market.
Dorés was determined to find the source of the texts. As a scholar, he wanted to keep the writings together. But he faced a wall of silence from the antique dealers in the street. With funding low, Dorés returned to Paris with little hope of finding the entire collection of the Coptic manuscripts. While he was in Paris, Dorés received a package from Maria de Tari. She sent a sample of the pages she had in her possession. Dorés realized that these texts were part of the Gnostic Gospels. Dorés was on the next flight to Cairo.
My God.
When he arrived at Maria de Tari's office, he went straight to the manuscripts.
How did you... Where did you get these?
He wanted to be sure that they were the same pages he had begun to translate.
This is fantastic.
Dorés was reading the last Gospel of Thomas that contained the secret words of Jesus. He found the passage he was looking for.
Do you know what this means?
That's enough. I have my price.
But before Dorés could tell Maria about the curse, bombs fell. Egypt was at war. Mina and Dorés were hard at work securing funds for the manuscripts, but the war created chaos in the antique world. Word arrived that Maria and Albert were leaving the country with the manuscripts. Dorés rushed to the antique market to intercept Hyde and de Tari before they left the country. He was in a race against time. If he didn't stop them, the text could be lost forever. It seemed like Dorés was always 2 steps behind the antique dealers and the manuscripts. Dorés' worst fears were realized. He was too late. Both dealers were well on their way. But it seemed like the curse of the Gnostic Gospels began to take effect. Maria de Tari was arrested by the Egyptian government, her manuscripts confiscated. Albert Hyde fled with the manuscripts back to Belgium. Togomina died mysteriously of unknown causes. His quest for the Gnostic Gospels was his undoing. Albert Hyde was later found dead in a hotel room.
Dorés went back to Paris and had not really been able to obtain the manuscripts, but since he was only a graduate student, the other people at the university seized control of the project and never really credited him for it.
The only one who gained anything was the Egyptian government, who confiscated the documents and locked them away in a vault.
No one knows if the misfortune that fell upon everyone who encountered the Gnostic Gospels was the curse or merely unfortunate circumstance. The manuscripts lay in a government vault for more than 20 years until James Robinson, an American scholar, translated them.
The translation of the Gnostic Gospels really came about in the 1960s. A man named James Robinson, who currently teaches at a university in Southern California, went out to Cairo and began to pester the Coptic Museum to let him see the manuscripts. So he had them over a weekend. He spent the 3 days in a dingy hotel room transcribing these manuscripts.
And now that's kind of exciting because there are some new sayings included in that collection, things that we don't have Jesus saying in the four Gospels. For example, saying number 34, I think, Jesus says, "Whoever is near me is near the fire, and whoever is far from me is far from the kingdom of God." Jesus could have said something like that. It's a tough saying.
The Gnostic Gospels were a very important discovery, but incredibly, that same year, there was another major discovery made, the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Then, of course, the same year, in 1947, a Bedouin shepherd boy was looking for a lost sheep of his, or goat, and he thought that the goat might have fallen into a pit, a cave, and he threw a rock down to rouse the goat, and he heard the cracking of ceramics. And inside, indeed, they found they had broken a great vase, a great jar in which the famous Dead Sea Scrolls, one of the famous Dead Sea Scrolls, was contained. And so this, of course, was a tremendous discovery because suddenly we have a library at the time of Jesus of Nazareth, which had not been ever even close to have been discovered before. Now we can compare how Hebrew scriptures were transcribed across 13.5 centuries. The thrilling fact is that it's 99.9% accuracy across all those years. And there are a lot of other reasons why the Dead Sea Scrolls are important, but I think that's the most interesting one.
In Egypt, the focus of attention for most visitors is the awe-inspiring antiquities, ancient wonders from the past.
But our journey to Egypt centers on places the Holy Family visited on their journey to safety. The Holy Family fled Palestine from Bethlehem, bypassing Jerusalem because of Herod's edict. They headed west across the brutal, arid conditions of the Sinai. In fear of Herod's army, they often traveled alone on lesser-known routes.
Another surprising thing that happened in the flight to Egypt, according to these early apocryphal Gospels, is that the Holy Family was set upon by a squad of robbers who couldn't steal anything from them because they were so poor. And so these gentlemanly thieves opened up their brown bag lunches and shared lunch with the Holy Family. And Jesus would see one of those nice thieves 30 years later at a place called Calvary. You guessed it, the thief crucified on his right. The good thief, remember the account.
The thieves weren't the only problem that the Holy Family encountered. It was also they had to cross this giant desert, the Sinai Desert, between Palestine and Egypt. This was a journey that would not be very difficult today. But they were on foot and on the backs of animals, and they were probably traveling 10, 20 miles a day. The desert was hot, sapping their strength and making them thirst for water. And there must have been very little relief. The journey was long, and the distances between watering holes was great. After making their way over the hot sands of Egypt for all this time, they come to the Nile River Valley, where there's abundant water and lush greenery. You can imagine what a welcome sight that must have been after all that traveling, to finally be able to drink. They'd arrived at last and were safe from Herod.
After replenishing their strength and supplies, they traveled south. But the severe desert conditions forced them to rest in Wadi Natrun. Their visit made this land sacred. As a result of their stay, a large concentration of monasteries grew in the early days of Christianity. Today, only 4 survive. At Anbar Bishoy Monastery, Father Tadros explains the power of the area.
The importance of this monastery comes from the point that the Holy Family visited this area during the flight to Egypt. And this became a holy place. That's why all the people all over the world come to visit this area. And since the people know that it is a holy place, they visit it from time to time. When they get a problem, when they get ill, they pray. And when they came back, they found that their problems were completely solved and they became healthy. That's why they cling too much to this area.
The miraculous power of the first Christmas endures to this day in this sacred place. Countless numbers of stories speak of the miraculous power that has endured for over 2,000 years. In the shadow of the monastery in Wadi Natrun, General Harper experienced a strange phenomenon.
I was fighting a losing battle.
How much ammunition do we have left? Not much. I figure we got enough to last us a couple hours. We gotta make these count.
I took responsibility for the men under my command. Those boys were like sons to me.
Where's our backup? General, I've got them on the phone. What's the situation? We're losing men left and right! What happened to Joseph? I don't know! A minute ago, he was right behind me! We gotta find him! Dude, cover me, I'm going out! We have to retreat, or we'll lose the whole unit! We'll have to regroup and move in another direction. If we keep moving north, we can make it to the main road. If the bridge is still intact, we can make it back to camp before tomorrow. All right, let's move out! General, aren't you coming? You men go ahead. I'm gonna stay behind and make sure the area's cleared. But General, there's no time. You gotta get out of here. I told you to move out. That's an order, soldier. How many individuals are left out there? They're ready to light a fire. I gotta get them out of there.
The last thing I remember was the explosion.
I don't know. You got here before we did. What happened?
I don't know. We were pulling out. I let my man go ahead of me. Someone must have dragged me to safety.
You're wounded. I gotta get you some help. You need medical attention. Medic! I need a medic over here!
I awoke again to find myself in the medical tent. I kept slipping in and out of consciousness.
2 cc's morphine. Check his IV.
He's severely burned over 60% of his body.
Should I change the bandages?
Well, give him another couple of hours. I'm afraid, though, there's lots of complications. We are going to have to remove his leg.
The next day, I asked for the Army chaplain to visit me. He said he would pray for me. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had since the start of the war. When I awoke, the bandages on my arm had been removed, and the wounds had suddenly healed.
Is there any pain?
No. It's like it was never burned.
I am puzzled.
The next night, I felt a presence in the room. But when I opened my eyes, no one was there. Just like my arm, my leg seemed to heal overnight. The doctor was baffled by this mystery. Then on the third night, I finally saw her. It was then that I realized it was her that had carried me to safety and healed my wounds. I am forever a changed man.
The vastness of the desert here is overwhelming. It was in this region, on the edge of civilization, that something profound may have happened over 2,000 years ago.
After resting at Wadi Natrun, the Holy Family traveled south. In due time, they reached Mostarat. The Virgin Mary Church was built to commemorate their stay and the miracle they performed. It was here that Joseph, Mary, and their young son found comfort in the shelter of this cave. The Holy Family had such an impact on the people of the town that its ancient name of Al-Mahama, or the bathing place, is a tribute to the fact that Mary bathed her child in the nearby waters. The Holy Family experienced such welcoming hospitality during their stay in Mostarod that they revisited it on their return to Palestine. It is told that Jesus was playing with a stick. Joseph took that same stick and plunged it into the ground, causing a spring to gush forth. This spring flows to this very day. The church provides a sanctuary for all that enter. People from near and far find comfort in the walls of this grotto. Many place prayer notes in hopes that the spiritual strength of the Holy Family will guide them through troubled times. Is there more information about the birth of Jesus that is not contained in the Bible? What was the mysterious light in the sky on the first Christmas? Where did the Holy Family go to escape the death warrant of King Herod? Are there special places where people are still touched by the incredible power of the Holy Family? Tonight, we will uncover the miracle of the first Christmas.
The discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Gnostic Gospels in 1947 were amazing archaeological finds. But these clues into Jesus' time were also seen as a sign that after the horrors of the war, it was time for a healing. During that same year, the Jewish people who had just suffered through the Holocaust were finally able to return to their homeland, the newly formed state of Israel. They had to fight a war to keep their new land. But miraculously, the fledgling country survived. Many think it was a miracle. In fact, that region has a long history of miracles, beginning with the virgin birth of Jesus and continuing as his family trekked to Egypt across the brutal conditions encountered in the Sinai. The desert was very hot, draining the Holy Family's strength and making them hunger and thirst. So often the miracles that occurred on their journey were simply the provision of food and water. But the miracles did not end there. People all along the route of the Holy Family's flight have reported that their incredible power affects them to this day. In Wadi Natrum, the Holy Family's visit so inspired the people that it became a building place for early Christian monasteries, some of which survive to this day. Having grown up in Wadi Natrum, a general found that his faith and the presence of the Holy Family protected him in battle. Pinned down by enemy fire, he was forced to order a retreat. Amazingly, he escaped with only minor injuries. Over the course of 3 days, he was completely healed by the power of the Holy Family. But the Holy Family's journey did not end there, and neither did the miracles.
The birth of Jesus initiated a series of events that would culminate in a new religion that would touch millions.
In 10 minutes, we saw a lifetime of hard work burn to ashes.
I felt helpless just standing there, watching the firemen fight a losing battle. But there was nothing anyone could do. Our business was lost.
They told us it started in the back room. What does it matter where the fire started? All I can see is what the fire ended.
I was starting to lose faith.
We had been through many difficulties in our marriage, but watching our life's work burn to the ground hit us hard.
Father Sherwood told us to meet him at the church.
It's just been a very difficult time. But, when I heard about the fire, I said a little prayer for you. We took up a special collection. I know it's not much, but we wanted you to know you're in our hearts.
Thank you, Father. It helps to know that people are thinking of us.
I know we'll get through this. It's just difficult right now.
Come with me. This was donated many years ago to the church by my grandmother. It used to hang in my grandmother's bedroom. When she was sick, it brought her great comfort. I'm going to lend it to you. Perhaps it'll make this difficult time easier.
Thank you, Father.
It had been a week since the fire. Emotionally, we were feeling better, but financially, things were a mess. Your brother called. He wanted to know if there's anything they can do.
What did you tell them?
I just told them to say a prayer for us and that if we needed anything, we'd give them a call.
My cousin said they may need help at the store, but it's the night shift. I should call them soon. The position could be filled.
I was at the laundry today. I saw a help wanted sign in the window. Maybe I should start there.
I feel like such a failure. Everything we've worked for is gone, and now my wife is going to be doing someone else's laundry.
I told Father Sherwood about the picture and what my wife and I had experienced. He told me to bring the picture back to him.
You know, when my grandmother was sick, she told me the Virgin had visited her. I think we should place this painting in a special shrine.
Why do you think she came to us, Father?
Perhaps she felt you were losing your faith. She knew this was a difficult time for both of you.
I'm glad it will be hanging in the church. This way everyone can share in its wonderment.
Father returned the picture to us, and 2 weeks later, we got the letter.
Oh my gosh. I don't believe it. Come quick.
What is it? What's wrong?
Remember that investment certificate we had? It finally matured.
Let me see it.
It's not enough to reopen the business, but at least it's a healthy start.
The miracle brought a sense of peace into our home and the strength to rebuild our lives.
Today, most of us take for granted life's simple necessities such as food, water, and shelter. But for the Holy Family, the harsh desert conditions made these simple needs as precious as life itself. So, many times the miracle the Holy Family prayed for was simply water and shelter from the unending heat.
The journey from Mosterot to Mataraya takes less than an hour using modern transportation. By foot, it is more than a day's journey. So when the Holy Family reached their next destination, they were hungry, tired, and thirsty. 2,000 years ago, this site was little more than scenery. Here the Holy Family stopped to rest under the shade of this tree and to eat of its fruit. The need for water overwhelmed the travelers. Realizing his family was in need, Jesus did what his father had done in Mosterot. He struck the earth with a branch from the tree. Once again, the earth yielded a spring. Mary was overjoyed and wished that Mataraya would be forever blessed. For over 2,000 years, this tree has been kept alive and the well flowing. As the virgin tree grows, so does the faith of the people who believe in the miracle of the first Christmas. Miracles that can be found in this place branch out and touch the lives of all who live in its shadow.
I had been working for the old man for 5 long years. He was cold-hearted, ran his business with an iron fist. But after the miracle touched his heart, he was a changed man.
Oh, not again. Oh. Those darn bells! How can I get any work done?
You know, I like those bells. They remind me of when I was a boy and my father and I used to walk to church.
Church, church, church. You people waste time in church. You could be working and earning money instead of praying about it.
You know, you should come to service with me this morning. I think you'll change your mind.
Look, who said you could go to church? We have to have this inventory done by 3 o'clock.
You said I only had to come in for 1 hour today. And plus, my wife and my little boy are waiting for me at church.
Oh, fine. Go to church. But if you do, you better pray for a new job.
Hey, come on, you don't mean that.
Look, I'm tired of wasting time with foolish people who believe in something that doesn't exist. Now get back to work.
How can I work for somebody who's going to stand in between a man and his faith? You know, I'm sorry, but I'm leaving, and if you want to fire me, go ahead.
Romero.
Yes?
You're fired.
I see many empty seats here today, but we shouldn't despair. We should reach out to those poor souls and show them compassion and understanding. It's not for us to judge them, lest we be judged ourselves. Remember, we mustn't forget those who have lost their faith, for those are the ones that need our help the most.
Santa Maria, Madre de Dios, ruega por nosotros. Dios te salve María, llena de gracia. Santa María, Madre de Dios, ruega por nosotros.
And now let us take a moment to reflect on those who are lost. Let the church bells ring so that they may find their way to us.
You people are driving me mad with your constant bells. Do you like this? Do you like this?
Listen, let's all calm down and talk about this rationally.
I'm tired of talking. You people make me sick. Every Sunday is the same thing. You disrupt my business, you block the entrance to my store with your after-church chatter, and your bells with their constant ringing. I am so angry. Don't be surprised if you come in next Sunday and find your church burned to the ground.
You don't mean that.
Oh, why is everybody trying to tell me what I mean and what I don't mean? All of you, just leave me alone. What? Who's there? Who's there? Go away! I'm an old man! I don't have anything you want! Who are you?
told us a lady came to visit him and said to him, "You were on the wrong path. You must change or suffer the fires of hell." I don't know what she showed him that night, but after that, every Sunday, he was the first one in church, and he himself rang the bells.
There are sacred sites all along the path of the Holy Family, monuments built to forever remind people of miraculous events which took place. What is most remarkable about traveling to these places is the extent of the faith expressed by the people who make these pilgrimages. No matter what religion or denomination, it is undeniable that the first Christmas set off an extraordinary chain of events that has touched millions and continues to demonstrate its spiritual strength.
The real testimony to the force behind these structures is the faith of the devotees. And perhaps the site that best illustrates the power of faith and prayer is a church in Zaytun, Egypt. This church not only serves the immediate community, but is a source of inspiration for countless others who enter these doors. In 1968, the world erupted in violence. International headlines concerned with student riots, assassinations, and war failed to notice what many describe as a miracle. On April the 2nd, Muslim workers at a local garage noticed a disturbance in the street. They ran to the front of the church and noticed what appeared to be a young woman walking on the dome. At first, they were concerned she would fall. Then they realized that it was humanly impossible to walk on the dome. It was then that they recognized the figure as an apparition.
It started with a rumor, actually, that, the Virgin Mary is appearing on top of the dome of the church in Zaytun. I went to probably the church when I was a kid, 8, 9 years old, like I mentioned, probably anywhere between 6 to about 8 times. My dad took me to the church because he kind of needed some sort of a solid proof. After a lot of hours standing in the yard of the church, that I was able to get a view of that white shaded ghost appearance of the Virgin Mary on the dome of the church. Probably we were there for something like about the day for about 4 hours, and when we were about to give up, we were tired from standing, and it was kind of like a nippy night, a little bit chilly. There's a lot of excitement in the air, and usually, before you know it, everybody's quiet, and before you know it, we started seeing the almost a half way of a person, almost all the way down to the stomach area, the face, the chest of the Virgin Mary, all covered in white. It absolutely does reaffirm my belief. It's firsthand, you've seen it, I was a kid, and it did have an impact on me, all through my life until today.
But a person did not have to witness the apparitions to be touched by the powers of the Holy Family. It seems that when ordinary people need their help, it arrives.
In all likelihood, the Holy Family was heading to ancient Cairo. There they could safely rest, free from the fear of Herod's threat.
After finally reaching a safe destination in the Jewish quarter, the Holy Family entered a Roman temple. The mere presence of Jesus in the temple caused idols to fall. This angered the local magistrate. The family fled through the ancient streets in search of safety. Here under the church of St. Sergius, the family hid in a cave. When the magistrate found the Holy Family, the power emanating from Jesus and his parents stopped the official, turning his anger into admiration, thus fulfilling the Old Testament prophecy. St. Sergius Church has become a Mecca for the faithful. Every prayer made here seems to celebrate the miraculous capacity Jesus had to convert anger into love, despair into hope, and fear into courage.
The Holy Family embraced their extraordinary situation, and by doing so, gained miraculous powers. We found numerous accounts where these miracles have occurred with the people who live along this path.
Many miracles took place in the town where I grew up. I never expected to experience one myself. It was during the heat of battle that I believe God stepped in and saved my life.
Volunteers to go on ahead and clear the area so our troops can move forward. Let me go, sir. Fine. You go with it. Come on. Yeah. Keep low. Keep low. I got you. Hey, if we keep to the right, we should be able to avoid the mines. Just keep moving. Follow me. Don't worry about me. I'll be right behind you. That was close! Let's keep going! You okay? Luke! Luke! You okay? Okay?
I think I just got the wind knocked out of me. What's wrong? It hurts.
You're gonna be all right. Doesn't look that bad.
I can't feel my legs.
Come on. Get out. Get us out of here. Just hang on, Luke. Hang on. Hang on, buddy. Hang on, Luke. Hang on.
It's beautiful.
Luke! 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 Luke!
Medic!
Worried about my mother. There's no one to take care of her.
I'll have one of the brothers check on her.
I'm scared, Father.
I know, Matthew. But I'd be worried if you weren't afraid. I can't think of anybody I'd rather have to defend our country than you.
Thanks for your kind words, Father. I really needed to hear them.
You'll be a great soldier. Your family will be proud of you.
Keep me in your prayers, Father.
I bought this for you. Take it. It'll give you strength.
Hey! Hey! We have an injured man here!
Doctor, I think he's waking up. Well, you gave us quite a scare.
Where am I?
You're in the medical tent? You've been unconscious about 2 days. Doctor, you better get in here quick.
What about Luke? How did I get here?
You were shot.
Am I okay?
You're gonna be fine, but it was a very close call, Matthew.
What do you mean?
Let me show you something. This is what saved your life, young man.
The Bible had been given to me by Father Barrow. The bullet which would have hit my heart was stopped by the Bible. The bullet came to rest on this passage. And who is he that will harm you, if ye be followers of that which is good? And if ye suffer for righteousness' sake, happy are ye. And be not afraid of their terror, neither be troubled.
The River Nile that flows through Egypt is its life force. Without it, the fertile lands that line its banks would be nothing more than a barren desert. So it is no wonder that the Holy Family would choose its nurturing waters for their journey back to Palestine.
Mahdi, a city divided by the Nile, reflects the diversity of Egypt itself. A modern city developed on the eastern bank, while across the river to the west, time seems to have stood still. The lush agricultural lands are still tended to by hand. Mahdi is the place where the Holy Family stayed before they set sail up the Nile for their return to Nazareth. All that remains as evidence of their stay is a set of steps that leads to the Nile. It was here, after receiving a message from an angel, that the Holy Family boarded a felucca, or sailboat, that would carry them north. The church which safeguards these steps is a source of inspiration and a symbol of hope for its parishioners. Many have found solace and strength for their struggles, knowing the Holy Family graced this area with their presence and fulfilled the Old Testament prophecy. Even though their stay was short, the examples of love, faith, devotion, and compassion which the Holy Family set have been a guiding force for many in this area. And once again, the extraordinary power of the Holy Family interceded when a devastating accident put this family's faith to the test. Delilah and her husband lived in a modest home with their daughter Anjali. The incident that occurred filled Delilah with guilt. But she learned that faith can indeed heal all wounds. It was a family tradition that all the women in the family learned to sew. Delilah was passing this tradition on to her daughter, teaching Anjali the fundamentals of hand sewing,
want to cut all the fabric first.
But Anjali wanted to learn how to use the sewing machine.
We sewed everything by hand.
I want to try.
Why don't you practice first with the needle and thread?
Delilah reminded her daughter that she had to learn the basics before she moved on to the machine.
But I want to help you make clothes to sell, then we won't be playing more.
Delilah left Anjali to finish her sewing while she left to prepare dinner.
Keep putting the needle in that way. That's it. You finish this seam and I'll go start dinner.
Wanting to help her mother, Anjali tried to teach herself how to use the sewing machine. She tried to force the fabric through the sewing machine.
I'll be right up, Anjali.
But when she heard her mother's voice, Anjali panicked.
I never should have left her alone.
That is when the accident happened.
By the time I heard her scream, it was too late. What happened?
Anjali went through 2 surgeries to remove the needle fragments. Both were unsuccessful.
The infection has spread. I'm afraid
The doctor explained the fragments would make their way to Anjali's heart, killing her.
if they enter her heart, it would be fatal.
Their only alternative was to amputate Anjali's hand.
She's going to lose her hand.
Delilah's worst fears were confirmed. Delilah decided to seek help from the church.
There's nothing more they can do.
She told Sister Borden about Anjali's situation.
You mustn't give up. But I'm worried I won't be able to pray.
Delilah and Sister Borden were touched by Anjali's fear.
Sweet.
Sister assured her that all prayers were heard, no matter what.
How could this happen? She's just a child. This is all my fault.
No, you cannot blame yourself. I know you. You're a good mother.
Don't cry, Mommy.
The nun tried to give them hope and comfort.
I could tell Anjali was in a lot of pain. I was terrified for her, but I didn't want to let her see that I was afraid. I couldn't believe it. Tomorrow, Anjali was going to lose her hand.
Is it going to hurt?
Like any child, Anjali had questions about the surgery that was to happen the next day. She wanted to know if it would hurt and how long the operation would take.
You get some rest now. That very night, the miracle happened.
While Anjali was sleeping, she awoke to find herself bathed in a bright light. The child showed no fear. She leaned into the warm light and then held out her injured hand. The next morning, Delilah brought Anjali breakfast.
Breakfast!
My hand feels all better.
She told her mother that a bright light came into her room. Delilah thought it was just Anjali's childish imagination.
That's nice, but we still have to go see the doctor.
She knew that the miraculous light that shone on her daughter was the miracle she had prayed for.
By piecing together ancient writings, we have been able to reconstruct the Holy Family's journey through Egypt. A miraculous presence endures with the people who live along this path. People who are living proof that miracles still happen through divine power.
Each year we honor the miracle of the first Christmas throughout the world. But what are the traditions that we celebrate 2,000 years after that event?
What's interesting in the way we celebrate Christmas today, a lot of travel is involved around Christmas time. Everybody's moving everywhere else. Well, the same thing was true of the very first Christmas. The Holy Family moved from Nazareth on a trip 6, 7, 8 days long, and Jesus is born in Bethlehem. They're there at least 40, 45 days minimum, and then comes the flight to Egypt, and went back to Nazareth, from which they had set forth. So now they have come full circle. But travel was certainly associated also with the very first Christmas.
Our gift-giving tradition reflects the generosity that began with a visit by the 3 wise men. The lights that decorate houses remind us of the Star of Bethlehem that guided the Magi to their destination. Christmas celebrates the unconditional love that families provide. But it is important to remember the significance of the first Christmas before we get caught up in the frenzy of the holiday season.
The Nativity is so terribly important, not because of the Nativity alone, but because of who this baby would become. This is the baby that would later on become Jesus of Nazareth, the luminous individual whose career has changed all of human history.
The significance of Christmas, I think, is important to keep in a balanced perspective. We must never sentimentalize the birth of Jesus so much that we neglect that salvation and liberation came to us through Jesus at great cost and at great suffering, and that the message of Easter is essential for the message of Christmas.
As we have seen, the miracle of the first Christmas set in motion events that changed the world. And as we traveled on the paths the Holy Family took, we revisited the places and miracles associated with the birth of Jesus.
From Nazareth to Bethlehem, to Egypt and back, our journey has been filled with discoveries and miracles. But none of this could have occurred without the miraculous beginning that was the first Christmas. I'm Roger Moore. Thank you for joining us.